Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today we are going to be talking about drag and drop, a little bit more advanced usage of it, using custom NSItemProviders, not just the ones that are already given to you by the system. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so we're going to do a couple things here today. We're going to start by checking out some of the slides from the WWDC talk on this topic, so you can see where that is. Data delivery with drag and drop. This was a really great session. We'll start off with the PDF slides. Okay, so this is the overall picture of how drag and drop works. You have the drag side of things over here. So this is when you lift something off the interface. And this includes both data passing and the UI animation. This right-hand side here is the drop interaction. This is where you actually drop your item or items onto the interface that passes the data on that side. But what links those two together is the drag item and the data source behind it, which is the ItemProvider. So there are some things to know. Okay, I got some notes here for you guys. An ItemProvider is a data promise. Basically, if you have an instance of this object, it's a promise that you can asynchronously get that data on demand when you need it. It also supports progress and cancellation. So you can basically check how far along the data transfer is, and you can cancel that data transfer if you need to. And there's some system types that already conform to NSItemProvider. Things like strings and images and attributed strings and URLs, you don't actually have to do anything for. It's really nice. That's kind of the basics. That's the 101. So you can have an image and create your image, and you can create an ItemProvider based on that image because UIImage already conforms to it conforms to NSItemProvider. And when you want to so this is how you provide the data. You create an ItemProvider, and you retrieve the data by calling this asynchronous method called loadObject on the ItemProvider. Give it a type of class, and you get back an object, an optional object and an error, and then you can go ahead and, this is on the background queue, so you have to make sure to dispatch to the main queue, and then you can update your UI with that data. So this is something that we've looked at already, right? And we can do a very quick review. I'll find that for you guys here. So we can go back to our drag and drop basics. This is all up on GitHub. We've got a simple storyboard. We can drag things around and we can drop things, right? We'll run this really quick. One thing I keep screwing up on is that this only works on iPad. It doesn't work on iPhone, and I keep running it in the iPhone simulator, and it doesn't work, and I keep kicking myself to figure out what's going on. So make sure you run it in the simulator. So this is a draggable item. I'm going to go ahead and drop it. Oops. I have a bunch of my demo stuff. Okay, that's fine. Let's quickly look at what's wrong here. So we have our drag interaction and our drop interaction. And sorry, this is a little bit messed up just because I was demoing how you can do all these different drop interactions. Preview for dropping, session did end, perform drop with session. So yeah, so this is the main class right here that when you want to perform a drop, you go ahead and you use this method right here to get access to the session. Okay, so let's back it up a little bit. Okay, so we're back to our slides here, and we're actually going to skip progress and cancellation, but we can talk about it very quickly. When you call this ItemProvider load object method, you get a progress object back, as you can see here. And for basically, you can determine the fraction completed of the progress, whether it's finished or not, and you can just use KVO on that to determine how far you've gone. And you can also call cancel on your progress to stop the data transfer. So here's where things get interesting. A lot of times, strings, attributed strings, URLs, and images won't be enough. You're going to need to pass more interesting data types than that, right? You might have your own models. You might have representations of things that, that don't work with that. So the way to think about it is an item provider is one thing being dragged around the screen, okay? But you can have multiple representations of that one thing. So we can have a simple dog model, right? And we could be dragging our dog around the screen, and you might see a little picture of a dog as you drag it around. But there's multiple ways to represent that data. And the way that they talk about it here is that the highest level of fidelity is like a vector drawing, okay? So it's got the most metadata. It's the richest possible implementation of that model. With a dog example, it might have the dog's image, the dog's name, how loud it can bark, how fast it can run, and it's a very specialized data type. And then you might have simpler representations of a dog. Like you might just have a picture or the name of the dog. And those are different representations of one single thing. So what you do is that you have different universal keys that you can have, and there are unique keys that are like unique to your data. So usually you use a reverse DNS like this, a native file format. But then there's also the common standards like PDF and PNG, and you can use mobile. You can import the mobile services framework to get access to these. Okay, so we're going to use these keys for our other representations of our item providers. We are going to then stack rank them in fidelity order. So your most metadata information rich representation will go first in the array, and then you will go down from there. So it might be our dog model with all of our fancy information, and next might be the image, and next might just be the name, but order matters. And basically, we don't want to use these generic types like public.data or public.plaintext. We want to be very concrete, like public.utf8 plaintext. Okay, so if you have your own class, your class can conform to one or both of these two protocols, NSItemProviderReading and NSProviderWriting protocols. So writing, the NSItemProviderWriting exports the data from your model object to a data representation. And reading is the other way around. It takes data and it populates your model. So for the writing protocol, you have to comply with two things. You have to pass in an array of type identifiers, starting again with the most specific, the highest fidelity, and then going down. And you have to provide, so this is no longer, wait, the writing is still right. Okay. You have to implement load data with type identifier for ItemProvider completion handler. Okay. And then for the writing, no. And then you can just use it like we did with the image before. So you can just say let ItemProvider equal NSItemProvider object, and then you pass in your new object that conforms to the writing. The reading is very similar. You pass in an array of type identifiers, again in fidelity, in order of fidelity, highest to lowest that you're able to handle. And then you implement a method, but this is now deprecated. It's not, or not deprecated, it's just gone. We will go over this. So this is no longer right, but it's still, you have to implement a method basically saying how do you return your model object from this data. And then it can be used in drag and drop, UI paste configuration, and UI pasteboard. Okay, so they did a really nice job with that. I definitely recommend watching that video. I've watched it twice already, and it was really, really helpful. We're going to go ahead and take a look at some code now. Just going to need 1 second to get ready here. Okay, sweet, I just airdropped this thing over. Okay. This was something I was working on last night. And here's what I'm doing. I'm creating a dog model that has two very simple things. It has an image and it has a max bark volume. So how loud can the dog bark? Okay, and it's just, I'm going to show you how I'm using that. Kind of what the idea of what we're going to do here today is. iPhone 7, you're not going to work. Let's go to the iPad Air. Okay, so very simply, we're going to have a table view of cute dogs whose model is a dog. So it has the image of a very cute dog and its max bark volume. And that is our dog's table view controller right here. And this is really simple, okay? This is an array of dogs. We created our array of dogs here. We are setting the table view's drag delegate to self, implementing some of the basic table view data source methods, including self row and index path. Nothing new here. This is just straight up normal table view stuff with one delegate method that makes it draggable, and that is items for beginning session at index path. And because we have an extension, which is UI table view drag delegate, and we are setting our table view's drag delegate to self, as long as we pass out one or more UI drag items in this array, we're going to get our drag and drop behavior. So this is a little bit of a review from what we did earlier. Here we go. So I long press on this guy here, and then I can drag him out and drag them around. This isn't ideal, right? You'd probably want to just have an image of the dog, and we can do that, but for now, that's not the focus of this lesson. We're focusing on the data transfer. So come up over this droppable area up here, and it's like that. You see the little green plus sign, which means we can copy it over. But let's keep going. So here's how we do this. We get a reference to the dog because we have an index path. So we say, at this index path, give me this dog. And then NSItemProvider. This is the same thing we saw in the example before where we used an image. We create the ItemProvider using a dog. And how does that work? Well, we need something. We can pass in anything here that conforms to NSItemProviderReading. So that's how we create our provider. And then our drag item simply UI drag item with ItemProvider. So basically we just wrap something in a container with this ItemProvider and we return an array of those things. So let's see how we're able to pass in a dog. That means it has to conform to NSItemProviderReading. So let's go back to dog and let's see why that's working. Here we have an extension on dog, which remember is a very simple class with a required image and an optional MaxBar volume. And we have to implement two things. We have to have a variable, which is writable type identifiers for ItemProvider, which is an array of strings. And we're going to pass back, in order of fidelity here, a dog type identifier, which is something I created, com.woofactory.test. So it's my personal thing. And we can. I'm also saying that I support PNGs. So if you can handle my dog type identifier, cool. I'll give you the best data that I possibly can with all the rich metadata. If not, and it's for other apps, it's probably unlikely that they would know how to conform to this. If you can handle a PNG, then you have to cast it as a string. Ew, wait a minute. So actually, this is some old stuff here. Okay, so if you can handle a PNG, then I'll also pass you something. So this is the first part of implementing NSItemProviderReading, NSItemProviderReading. And the second part is load data with type identifier for ItemProvider completion handler, and it's going to pass back an optional progress. So let's break that down. So it's really doing two things. It's returning an optional progress item. Let's check that sucker out. So that's a subclass of NSObject that can do the things we talked about before. We can find out if it is finished or not, the percent complete, and we can call cancel on it. That's not what I'm interested in doing right now, so I'm not even going to bother because it's optional. I'm just going to return nil, which returns nil for the progress item. The part that we're focused on today is returning this completion handler. So for this completion handler, we have to pass back optional data and an optional error. That's the type definition of this thing. So we're going to switch on type identifier. So if the person who's looking for this data is looking for an actual dog model, which is probably going to be my app itself, I'm going to say, let's create the data by calling NSKeyedUnarchiver, archive data with root object on self, which means let's create data from self, from this instance of dog. I was having a little bit of trouble with this. So I have all these stupid print statements here. So this isn't 100% working right now. Hopefully we'll be able to figure out why today. And if you're looking for the dog, we're going to pass in the completion of the data that came from this dog model with no error. And if you're not looking for the dog and you're like a Photos app and you're looking for the PNG representation, then I'm going to pass in the completion handler UI image PNG representation of the image of this dog, of self. So what that means is that you're going to still be able to get the image of the dog, but you're going to lose some of the rich metadata. You're going to lose how loud this dog can bark. So that's okay, because maybe it's a photo sharing app and they really don't care about how loud dogs can bark. And then in the switch, my default is completion handler where I'm going to pass no data. And I made this silly error called dog error can't make dog, which is just seriously as simple as this. Create a type, it conforms to error, and a simple case that says can't make dog. It's just a really easy way to pass this error back. So now that we've completed this variable and we've filled out this method, we now conform to NSItemProviderReading. So when we go back to our dog's table view controller again, that's why we're able to create this NSItemProvider with an object which is just a dog, because dog conforms to the writing protocol. Now, let's go over to the dog's lover view controller. We'll look at it in the storyboard real quick. Dog lover. Okay, dog lover's view controller has an image and a MaxBar label. So this particular example, we're going to say that this view controller knows about the dog model. Maybe because it's in our app, or maybe because it's in a sister app of ours, or maybe we publish the data that says like what's available with this model and somebody else conforms to it and they say they're willing to handle it. So, but whatever, this particular view controller knows about a dog. So let's look at our dog lover view controller, and does a little UI initialization, just sets the text to nil, and then it adds a drop interaction to this view controller's view. And again, we covered this in an earlier lesson as well. Basically, we're adding this thing called the UI drop interaction, which allows you to perform a drop, and we're attaching it to our view controller's main view. Now, because we did that, if we want to get delegate calls about when there is a drop, we are going to write an extension here on dog lover view controller of UI drop interaction delegate. So while a drag is happening over us, we're going to be able to say, when the drag becomes active over our region, we're going to get asked, can you handle it? And we'll say, if the object in the drag item, if you have at least one dog, then we can handle it. And then we'll get called and we'll say, the session did update. Can you give me a proposal for how you would handle this? And we're going to say, our proposal is to copy. So basically copy the data over. And then finally, when a drop happens, we're going to get an item, which is a drag item. Basically, we're just going to say from the session, we're going to give me all your items, give me your first item, and we're going to call that our drag item. Because you can have multiple drag items. But this is a simple case, so we just want the first one. We know there's only one. And then our item provider, we're going to get the items item provider. Let's see what that is. That is an NSItemProvider. Okay, great. So because we are also conforming to NSItemProviderReading, we can ask it to load the item provider of class of class dog. And in the completion handler here, we're going to get a dog, an optional dog, and an optional error. We're going to say if there's an error, let's handle it. In this case, we're just printing it out. Otherwise, dispatch to the main queue, and we're going to update our model. So we can basically be like the dog ImageView.image equals the dog. Wait, hold on a second here. Wait, the NSItemProvider. Oh, okay. So we need to cast it, but because we know that we're loading a dog here, we can cast let dog equal the dog. Well, we'll guard just to make sure that there's something here. Guard let dog equal the dog as dog, else return. So let's make sure we have a dog, and let's just double check to make sure that the dog is actually a dog. We can say dog ImageView.image equals dog dot image. And because we have all this rich data, we can also say MaxBar volume label dot text equals dog dot MaxBar volume. Nah, we don't want to do that. Because we're in a closure, we need to call self. Let's just do it a little nicer. Oh, because this is an optional property, we'll do this. If let MaxBar volume equals dog.MaxBar volume, and then we'll just say self.MaxBar label.text equals max is MaxBar. Okay, so let's go back now. So the reason we can do this provider.load object of class dog, and let's take a look here. So load object of class NSItemProviderReading. So basically we can load anything that conforms to NSItemProviderReading. And the reason we can pass dog here is because back in our model we have another extension, which is NSItemProviderReading. So in order to conform to that, again, we have to readable type identifier. So again, we're saying that we can handle a dog type identifier or a PNG. And we can, so given some data, how are we going to load this up? We're basically going to say, if we're requesting a dog type identifier, and this is what we're getting, we are going to unarchive some data as dog, and then return self.init with the image and the MaxBar volume. Or if the person can't give us what we're looking for, like our preferred rich data would be the dog type identifier. If all they can give us is an image, then we can say, okay, no problem, give me that image. And then we'll return self.init with that image and then just the MaxBar volume of nil. We can still create our model like this. Again, default is throw an error of can't make the dog. Okay, so given those two things, they're very similar to the writing method. We are now conforming to NSItemProviderReading, and again, that's why we're able to request load object right here. I got a little bit tripped up, and I can show you folks where I'm getting tripped up. Okay, so we drag our guy out here. We have a representation of the data. Now when we drop it over this zone here, you can see the plus. And when I go to load the data, there's an error. And that error is cannot load representation of type com.wolffactory.test. That's a little different than I saw last time. Okay. Unable to insert, copy, send. So the problem is that for some reason, we're not able to get this data to be able to be loaded. And I don't exactly know why. Because here's what should be happening. The drop delegate is saying, what I'm looking for is, I'm looking for an instance of dog. I want to load an object. As long as you have at least one object of dog, I want to have it. Now, what that should do is, that should go over and it should tell, in this method here, it should come down and it say, I'm looking for dog type identifier. Give me this data, pass in the completion handler with the data with no error. And then it should get filled out here. It should get, the dog should be unarchiving. Huh. Yeah, it should unarchive here, give me this dog, and return it. So it should get the dog model here, and then I'm trying to return it here. So I don't know. I really don't know. Unless I can do this. But this wasn't working either. Wait. Yeah. Let's just see. Yeah. Just trying to force everything. So yeah, this is what was screwing me up. Cannot convert return expression of type dog to return type self. You can see here, it's requiring that I return type self. And this is the part that's screwing me up. So I'm probably going to have to go back and do some more investigation on this. Because there's not a lot of documentation on this method right now. But we can keep going. There's still some things that we can do. Okay, so there's one other thing I wanted to try, which we can just do in real time here. I have this other class, which is a UIViewController. And this is going to be our image lover, our picture lover view controller. And we'll do this one together. We'll see if this one works. Picture. We're going to give it picture lover view controller. And this one is an example of something that doesn't really care about dogs. It just likes images. So it might collect images of cats and dogs and sharks and landscapes and whatever else. So all we're going to have here is a image view. And we'll give this view controller a background color just so we can tell it apart. We'll give this one, what do we not have yet? We need a red. Okay, so this one will be red. And we will add some constraints to our image view. Just kind of messing around adding this quickly. We'll set our image view to aspect fit. Then we're going to go ahead and create an outlet. So from our image view to our picture lover view controller, we're going to call this dog image view. Okay, so the goal here is to make this view controller also be a drop delegate, but it's not going to care about dogs. It's just going to ask for the image. It's going to ask for the second level of fidelity. It's not going to care about the dog. It's just going to care about the picture. So let's give that a shot. So again, well, before we do that, let's do our extension. Extension on picture lover view controller. It's going to conform to UI drop. UI drop interaction delegate. Cool. Just to keep this really simple, so this we can actually just copy from the dog lovers. And again, what we're doing is we're creating an interaction element and we're going to attach that to our view. And then we are going to basically say drop interaction, for now, let's just copy paste a bunch of this stuff. Now, here, instead of asking, hey session, do you have any dogs? We're just going to say, do you have any images? Because that's all we really care about. I guess we could specifically ask about PNGs, but that's okay for now. And then our drop proposal is going to remain copy. And then drop interaction perform drop. This is the method that gets called when the user actually drops, lifts their finger and drops the item over you. So we're going to say guard let item equals session dot items dot first else return. Let provider equal item dot provider. Oh, no, it's not right. Sorry. That's ItemProvider. Now, we're going to do something very similar. We're going to say provider dot load object of class. Now we're looking for a UI image. Image error. Okay, so now again, we're going to say, now we can copy a little bit. We can say, copy all of this actually. Okay, so if there's an error, print the error and return. Otherwise, let's make sure that we have our image. So we're going to say guard let image equals image as UI image, else return. So now we're making sure we're working with the image that was dropped. Oops. Yeah, actually that's still fine. And then when we update our interface, again, we're in a non-main queue thread here. So before we update our interface, we're going to drop to the dispatch queue.main.async, and we're going to say, we're going to load up that image view with our image. Dog image view, image equals image. Again, we're in a closure, so we have to call self. Sweet. Let's see if that works. So this time we're not trying to get a data representation of the entire model, just of the image itself. And that might be a little bit easier. Let's see. We're going to drop it over the zone here. Okay, sweet. So let me explain why that worked and the other one didn't. I like that. Okay. The reason this one worked is because we were asking the item provider to load an object of class UI image. Okay, so we're going to go back to our dog, and it's going to come down here in this method. It said load data, and we're going to say, what type of data are we looking for? Are we looking for a dog identifier, the full model? No, we're not. Are we looking for an image? Yes, we are. So we're going to say, okay, give me the UI image PNG representation of this dog's image, which is a very standard way to create data. So this returns, if you're not familiar with this returns an optional data property and no error whatsoever. And then in the reading side of things, it's going to say, okay, object with item provider data, and it's going to, am I trying to load in a dog? No. Am I trying to load an image? Yes. So again, give me that image with the data, and then return a instance of a dog with the image and a bark volume set to nil. And again, what we get is we get a lower fidelity. I mean, this is, of course, this is a kind of a trivial example, but we get a low fidelity representation of a dog, like a dog with a picture, but no bark volume. But that's all we cared about. So this is a scaled down fidelity of a dog. So we're losing some metadata, but we're still able to show the picture. But in this case, you know, here's our guy. And if we had other apps that we were pulling things in from, as long as they were pictures, as long as they were PNGs, it'd be no problem. We could load this up. So imagine this was a completely separate app. It was just a photo sharing app. And we have our dog app over here and our photo sharing app over here. We can drag the full model of the dog, put it over here on the photo sharing app, and since it only cares about the image part of it, and our model supports just sharing a PNG version of itself, these two can interact together, which is really cool. I think that to get this to work really well, people are going to have to somehow coordinate between apps, like what types of data they support and what format, like proprietary data models are going to come as. But even as a very basic technology, I think it's very, very cool. Just because we can, let's put this guy up here. And that switches out. And this guy switches out. Unfortunately, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look into this as to why this way of creating the data is causing an error. I will either post my results in the comments, or I will do a follow-up once I figure this out. If any of you guys know, it would be great if you could, you know, let me know in comments as to what you think I'm doing wrong. This code will be up on GitHub. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you all soon.